What's up guys, and welcome to my full in-game Archer guide. In this video I'm going to be taking you over an overview of his kit, then I'll be taking you over his best Lightcones, relic sets, ornaments, and then relic stat recommendations for both main stats and substats, and then at the very end some team ideas for him. And with that being said, let's get straight into the video. Archer is a quantum character following the path of Hunt. His basic attack deals quantum damage based off his attack to a designated enemy. His skill will make him enter a state called Circuit Connection. In this state, you're going to be able to consecutively use his skill. Each shot will consume 2 skill points and also deal quantum damage equal to 360% of Archer's attack to one designated enemy, and using them consecutively will not end the current turn. Each shot will increase the damage dealt by his skill by 100% and can be stacked up to 2 times that will last until he exits the Circuit Connection state. You can choose to exit the state whenever you want, but it will force you out the state if you do use the skill 5 times in a row, or you run out of skill points. It will also end if you defeat a wave with his skill. So if you're at the end of wave 1, you shoot one more time, and let's say you maybe had 1 or 2 shots left. If you kill the last enemy and you go on to wave 2, it will end that turn. If you do, however, kill a boss and put them into phase 2, you'll still be in that state, so you can consecutively shoot even after they do go into phase 2. His ultimate deals quantum damage equal to 1000% of Archer's attack to one designated enemy and gains 2 charge, up to a maximum of 4 charges. His talent gives Archer access to a follow-up attack, and the way you can use the follow-up attack is when a teammate attacks an enemy. It will consume a charge and he will launch a follow-up attack on that primary target, which will deal quantum damage equal to 200% of his attack and also recover 1 skill point. If the attack target is defeated before you launch the follow-up attack will be directed to a random enemy instead. His technique will immediately attack the enemy, and once you do enter combat, you'll do quantum damage equal to 200% of Archer's attack to all enemies and gain a charge. His A2 increases the skill point maximum limit by 2 when he is on the field. His A4 will give him a charge when he enters battle, and his A6 will let Archer gain a 120% increase to crit damage for 1 turn if an ally gains a skill point and they have 4 or more skill points. Archer's E1 will let him recover 2 skill points when using skill 3 times within a turn. His E2 will reduce the enemy target's quantum res by 20% when using ultimate and also induce quantum weakness for 2 turns. His E4 increases his ultimate damage dealt by 150%, and his E6 will allow him to recover a skill point when his turn begins. The maximum number of stacks provided by his damage boost effect in his skill increases by 1, meaning it is now 3 stacks so you can get up to 300% damage dealt, and now his skill damage additionally will ignore 20% of the target's defense. When looking at what Lightcones to use for Archer, his best one is obviously going to be his own signature Lightcone, which does increase the wearer's crit rate by 16%. When entering combat, if ally skill point limit is 6 or higher, increases the wearer's attack by 40%. After each use of wearer's skill, increases the wearer's attack by 10%, stacking up to 4 times. Crit rate statistic is very important on Archer as you want to get to as close as 100% crit rate as possible. The second part of the Lightcone, increasing attack by 40%, is doable by Archer and Archer alone, as he does overcap your skill points by 2. So you will also be getting a 40% increase to attack for free entering battle. And Archer does repeatedly use skill, so you're also going to be able to stack up the last part to get even more attack, as attack is the only stat that he doesn't really give himself too much of. So that is going to be nice. So you're repeatedly doing it, and every shot compared to the last is going to do slightly more damage. After 4, you will be hitting the cap, and then the 5th one will be the same thing as the 4th. So as he is able to fully utilize this Lightcone and it's providing 2 very important stats, being crit rate and attack percent, it is overall his best in slot. Doctor Ratios is also really good for him, which increases the wearer's crit damage by 20%. For every debuff on the enemy target, the wearer's crit damage dealt against this target additionally increases by 8%, that stacks up to 3 times. When using ultimate to attack the enemy target, the wearer receives a disputation effect, which will increase damage dealt by 36% and enable the follow-up attacks to ignore 24% of the target's defense and will last for 2 turns. So rather than crit rate, it's giving you even more crit damage, which he needs less of, but still going to be nice. You're going to need a debuff on the team, and you usually always do, so having the 3 debuffs on an enemy to get the full extra 24% crit damage dealt shouldn't be a problem. So you're getting a 20% increase to crit damage for free, and then an additional 24% for crit damage dealt. And now when you do use your ultimate for 2 turns, you will be able to have an increased damage dealt, which is going to amplify all sources of damage he does have. And his follow-up attack specifically will do a lot more damage, as it is providing a defense ignore. His follow-up attack is more utility rather than damage, but you still can get it to do good damage. And in short, this Lightcone does make it do a lot more damage thanks to the defense ignore being very high, and is another fantastic option to use. Another great option you can use is Topaz's signature Lightcone, which increases the wearer's crit rate by 18% and increases damage dealt by follow-up attacks by 30%. After the wearer uses a follow-up attack, it will inflict the tame state on the target hit, stacking up to 2 times, and when anyone hits the target under tame state, each tame stack will increase crit damage dealt by 12%. So crit rate, again, very important. It's going to increase follow-up attack damage, which is kind of whatever, but still going to be there. And now hitting an enemy with his follow-up attack is going to make him take increased crit damage, so not only is he going to be able to do more damage, but anyone on your team is going to do more damage to them. So if you have a sub DPS such as Silver Wolf or Cypher, which is very common, they'll do more damage. Trippy follow-up attacks will do more damage, and so on. So this is more of a trade-off on personal damage and adding on a bit more team damage. And since it also does provide a good crit rate and I guess an alright follow-up attack increase, it is another option you can use. The Herder Shop Lightcone is also really good, which increases the wearer's crit rate by 8% and increases crit rate further against enemies who have HP percentage equal to 50% or lower by an extra 8%, and when defeating an enemy, you gain a 20% increase to attack for 2 turns. And at S5, both values for crit rate is 16% with a 40% increase to attack when defeating an enemy. So 60% crit rate, very nice. The thing is, you still want to build them with around 90% crit rate with this because you want to have this more as a failsafe. So once you do get them below 50%, you're guaranteed to crit no matter what, but you still want to have really high crit. You don't want to end up having like 84%. You still want to have around the higher 90s, at minimum 90% crit rate. Just once you do get them below 50, you're now guaranteed to crit every time. You still want to make sure you're critting when they're above 50 and you don't want to rely on the extra 16%. So it's more of a failsafe, and defeating an enemy with him, especially an enemy on the side, is very easy. So gaining a 40% attack buff is going to be really good for him, making it another really usable option on him. Another great option is the Battle Pass Lightcone, which increases the wearer's crit damage by 24%, and skill and follow-up attack damage dealt increases from the wearer by 24%. And at S5, it is a 40% increase to crit damage and a 40% increase to follow-up attack damage dealt and skill damage. So more crit damage, more damage overall, as long as you still can build crit rate. You're amplifying his main source of damage being skill by an extra 40% and also helping out with this follow-up attack a little bit. It is unfortunate it is not ultimate damage because then it would be really good, but you're still going to make your follow-up attack do more damage with this Lightcone. And again, it is mainly for the fact that it's amplifying your skill damage, which is why it is another fantastic option to use. Another option you can use is Swordplay, which for each time the wearer hits the same target, damage dealt increases by 8%, that stacks up to 5 times and is dispelled when you change targets. And at S5, it becomes a 16% increase for each stack. So as you constantly attack one enemy, each hit is going to do more damage as you are constantly attacking them, which is why it is actually still a usable option. You do sometimes want to switch, but in this case, you'd want to hard focus down that enemy you are doing to ensure you have the full effect of this Lightcone. You will have to stack it up each time, so if you don't have any of the other options, this is a weaker option, but it is still usable for you to use. When looking at what relic set to run, his overall best in slot is 4-piece of the Genius set. 2-piece increases quantum damage by 10%, and the 4-piece when the wearer deals damage to a target enemy ignores 10% defense, and if the target enemy has quantum weakness, the wearer additionally ignores 10% defense. 2-piece increases his overall damage as he is a quantum DPS, and the 4-piece gives him up to 20% defense ignore. Defense ignore / defense shred is really nice on Archer himself, since usually his supports will be the one providing attack percent since he doesn't have too much attack percent. He has a lot of damage and he also provides a lot of crit damage for himself, and usually you pair him with Sparkle, which is one of his best teammates, providing him a lot more crit damage. So one of the only other ways to give him a lot more source of damage is defense ignore / defense shred. So a free 10% defense ignore on its own isn't too good, but often you're pairing him with other things such as running someone with Cypher's Lightcone. Silver Wolf provides a big defense shred, Payload Ultimate provides a big defense shred. If you have support Eidolons and so on, just stacking more defense ignore and more defense shed as much as you can up to 100% is going to increase his damage by a lot. Silver Wolf is also very commonly ran with him, and if you are running her, you can practically guarantee the full uptime on this relic set, as Silver Wolf now with her buff state can guarantee quantum weakness implants, making this relic set overall the best in slot, especially if you're able to stack a good amount of defense ignore / defense shred. Another good option for him is going to be the Scholar set. 2-piece increases crit rate by 8%, 4-piece increases damage dealt by skill and ultimate by 20%. After using ultimate, additionally increases damage dealt by the next skill by 25%. 2-piece will make it easier to balance as he does want to get as close as to 100% crit rate as possible, and he doesn't give himself any crit rate, so this is going to be really nice. And the 4-piece increases his main source of damage, aka his skill, by 20%, and also does affect his ultimate, which also is a big hard-hitting ultimate. So getting a buff to that damage is going to be nice, and when you do use his ultimate, the next skill you are using is going to also get a further damage increase, so that's going to do even more damage. So these are focusing on the main sources of damage he does have, primarily his skill, but also his ultimate, making it another great option to use. You can also utilize Poet on him. 2-piece is the same as Genius with 10% quantum damage, so he does benefit off that. 4-piece decreases the wear speed by 8%, and when the wear speed is lower than 110/95, increases wear's crit rate by 20%/32%, and also applies the Memo Sprite. Archer doesn't have a Memo Sprite, so you ignore that part. Unfortunately, Archer is not able to utilize this fully because he doesn't actually get the 32% because he cannot go below 95 speed. So you're going to be stuck with 20% crit rate rather than 32%, but 20% is still really good, and crit rate is again super important on Archer. So if you happen to have really good pieces with crit damage and attack percent on this set, it's going to be really good for him, and you practically will never build Archer with speed. So it's very easy to utilize this, and it could potentially help you get really nice crit ratios, making it another really good and usable set. If you can't use any of those, it would be combining 2 pieces. So 2-piece of Scholar, it would be really good, and it's probably going to be the most used one as it is crit rate. Combine that with 2-piece Poet or 2-piece Genius with a quantum damage. 2-piece of one of those with 2-piece Wave Shredder also works, or one of those with one of the attack percent increasing sets, so Wind Soaring, Hero Set, Dot Set, or Musketeer. For Planet Ornaments, the only one you really want to use is going to be Rulin Arena, providing the wearer a 8% increase in crit rate, and when the wearer does reach 70% or higher crit rate, damage dealt by basic attack and skill increases by 20%. 70% crit rate should not be a problem, as again, you want to really get as close as 100% as possible. And with that, you're getting a free 20% damage increase to his skill, so the main source of his damage is going to be getting amplified. Basic attack you can practically ignore because you never really want a basic attack for him. It's mainly because this ornament is focusing on the skill. You can also use Inner Salsado, which is the same thing, providing 8% crit rate, and rather than 70%, it is a 50% requirement for the crit rate, but it rather will increase ultimate and follow-up attack damage by 15% for the wearer instead. So he does have a follow-up attack, so you will be focusing on that, and his ultimate also does good damage, so you will be getting an increase to that, but running Rudolin is still better. But if you do happen to have really good Salsado pieces, you still very much can use this, and would be the next and practically only option left. When looking at what main stats to run, for the body, you practically always will be doing crit rate. The only way you're not is if you're running a Poet set and you already have enough crit rate to get him to as close as 100% possible when you are in battle. It's so important and so vital to get him to 100% crit rate, because if you miss a crit on one of these characters that hit one big hit, it's very devastating, so 100% crit rate is important, so crit rate will be the most one you do run. If you're running Poet, you can probably end up having a crit damage setup, but again, even with Poet, you want to make sure you get as close as 100% in battle as possible. So if you happen to just have really good crit rate rolls on your pieces, you can opt to do crit damage, but again, for the most part, it is going to be crit rate. For the feat, you'll always really do attack percent, as you don't want to build speed on him because it'll make it even harder to manage SP. For the orb, you can use quantum damage or attack percent, just use whatever has the better substats. And for the link up, you want to run attack percent. For the substats, you want to first focus on crit rate, get it close to 100% as possible. I cannot stress this enough. There is no point in running Archer if you're having a 60% crit rate with a bunch of crit damage. The moment you miss a crit, you're going to lose so much output. Getting close to 100% crit rate on Archer is the most important thing you can do, and that will be the first major goal you do have. And then past that, you can focus on more crit damage and attack percent. He already gives himself 120% crit damage, so you realistically only really need to get to like 110 to 130% crit damage. Anything higher than that is very good. Attack, you want to get it to around 2800 minimum. Getting it around 3000 would be ideal. But again, the main goal is to neglect these at least until you do get that 100% crit rate. That is the most important thing you can do. For team building for Archer, the first slot is usually always going to be accompanied with Sparkle. Without Sparkle, you're going to see a major drop-off, so this is practically an unchangeable slot. Sparkle, if you have her, will always be in the slot, and if you're unfortunate enough to not have her, the only substitute for her would really be someone like Hanya. Hanya is the only one you can do to help him with front-loaded SP. You can also use Sunday in the slot. The only problem is Sunday generates skill points infinitely slower and is more backloaded rather than front-loaded. That's why the other two do have an advantage, and he is able to make use of her buffs pretty well, especially with certain setups. But yeah, usually the spot would always be Sparkle. She is just going to be the absolute best teammate you would have to use, so Sparkle would always be in this slot. The third slot would usually be a debuffer, as you usually always want to have someone in a form of a debuffer. Silverwolf is overall the best option you can use with their defense shred, and defense shred is really good. But you still also can use someone like Cypher, but in this case I'll just use Silverwolf. And the last slot would depend if you are doing Sustainless, as Sustainless with Archer is very good. Hard to use to stay alive, but it is still very strong. But if you are running a sustain, you would usually run it in a form of an SP generator. Gallagher, built really fast as an SP generator, is going to be the best, but you can also still do it with someone like Luocha. You can do it with someone like Lingsha. They are possible, but Gallagher would overall be the best. So you would run something like this. And if you are doing sustain list, then obviously sub out the sustain for another debuffer. So in this case, you could use Cypher or Pela, especially if you have Cypher's Lightcone on one of them. Or you can also put another support, so Chibi, especially with an E1, works great. You could use Ruan Mei, especially if you have an E1, is really good. Robin also works really well. Those would be the ones. Robin is a bit harder just because you do have to start with the skill point usage, so that's going to be harder to manage. But with someone like Ruan Mei, you don't. Someone like Chibi, you won't. So they are very easy to do, so something would look like this. Those are kind of what you want to do and how you'd sub them out. If you don't have a debuffer, you could do a full support thing, but that's going to be significantly worse. So you usually also have a debuffer, even if it's Pela for the defense shred, because it is going to be very important. And that does wrap up the Archer guide. If you guys found the video helpful, drop a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of Star content and guides. And I'll see you later. Peace out.